Today we're talking about soil. We're talking about the ideal soil, how to improve soil. It's a wonderful conversation. And we'll start with the Fast Five. What's your name?
Dale Strickler.
And what's your consulting company called?
Regenerative Wisdom.
And where are you located?
So we are based right now in Wichita, Kansas. Well,
Okay.
right in the middle of everything.
Oh, yes. And what year did you start grazing animals?
Oh my. Well, I grew up doing it, so I'm not sure when you can claim to have any sort of responsibility. If having a responsibility means you get blamed when things go wrong, that would be at a very young age.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But as far as my own livestock, I bought my own herd for the first time in 96.
Oh, yes.
And well, actually, I had some sheep. I bought sheep in fall of 90 and bought cattle in 96.
Oh, okay. And that kind of leads into the next question. What livestock species have you grazed?
Cattle and sheep, predominantly cattle, but I have a major interest in multiple species, dying to get into goats, dying to get into pastured poultry and pastured pork.
Yes.
And where can we go? I'd love to do pastured alligators, but my wife, she put the no alligator sign up. She said nothing that eats toddlers.
Attention ranchers, are you ready to boost your ranch's profitability in 2025? Join Noble Research Institute for Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas, this January 28th, 29th. This transformative 2-day course will help you unlock the full potential of your land and livestock. Noble's experienced advisors with over 200 years of combined experience will guide you through proven strategies to enhance your bottom line. You'll learn how to improve soil health, maximize forage quality, reduce costly inputs, and optimize stocking rates. This course is designed to address your unique challenges and build lasting solutions for your ranching operation. Through hands-on activities and interactive conversations, you'll gain valuable skills to create a more resilient, productive, and profitable ranch that will thrive for generations. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from the best and secure your ranching legacy. Register by December 30th to save $50 with our early bird discount. Visit noble.org today to enroll in Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas, January 28th, 29th. Invest in your land, livestock, and livelihood this January. For 10 seconds about the farm, we're combining it with 10 seconds about the podcast, so not much to it today, but just want to wish those celebrating Christmas a Merry Christmas. And to others, we hope it's going well for you. My wife asked me, she says, you're releasing an episode on Christmas? I said, yes, because when I dairied, I know I milked the cows every day. So I know some of you are out there moving cows, milking cows, doing other chores. And this episode's for you. If you happen to get the day off, enjoy it. Listen when you get a chance. Let's jump back to the conversation with Dale.
I think when you look at the status of U.S. agriculture, I mean, we are completely, totally dominated by corn and soybeans.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, that's where most of our land is used. And what are those corn and soybeans used for? Pigs and poultry. And
Yeah.
so even if we do pastured pigs and poultry, I mean, grain farming is inherently destructive to soil, and we'll get into that later, but it is in isolation, a corn soybean rotation, your soil slowly just gets worse over time, even with no-till. No-till slows the destruction, but it doesn't really stop it. and you can add cover crops and make it better. But if you're grain farming without interventions like that, you're destroying soil. And so our entire country is destroying soil. Perennials build soil.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and so that's probably jumping ahead to stuff we'll be talking about later, but I'm very, very interested in creating pasture systems for pork and poultry that displace, not just have them on grass and then you bring them in corn and soybean from outside so that you're enriching this spot of land, but impoverishing a farm somewhere else.
Yeah, transferring those
The
nutrients.
feed is being produced on site. The concentrate
Oh,
feed
yeah.
is being produced on site. I'm very, very excited about that prospect. I think it's an absolute game changer. And it's something that people talk about scaling up. Well, you can't scale that up. You can't do that on 10,000 acres. I'm like, is it really desirable for every farm to be 1,000,000 acres?
Oh, yeah.
And we have
Yeah.
200 farmers in the entire country.
Right.
I mean, would it be desirable if Bill Gates owned every piece of farm ground in the United States? Is that progress?
Right. Yeah.
I don't think it is. And I think, Thomas Jefferson said that one of the greatest achievements, I believe it was Jefferson, said that one of the greatest achievements in society would be creating the ability to make a living off a very small acreage.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not about how many acres you have. It's about having a good life and a good lifestyle and being happy. And I don't think owning 1,000,000 acres creates that. You just, at some point, I mean, I have worked for a farmer that did farm 1,000,000 acres,
Oh, yes.
and not in the US, but, I don't know how you could possibly be happy with that level of stress in your life.
Right. Yeah. I I agree with that.
I
Yeah,
think it's more important to have systems of agriculture that we can scale down.
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can we make a living on, it's like, name that tune. Can I make a living on 1,000 acres? Well, I can make a living on 500. Can I make?
Yes.
No. And I think that maybe we ought to flip our thinking upside down and said, how do we want to live? What kind of food do we want to produce? And what's the minimum amount of acreage it takes to accomplish that?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're trying to make a living with corn and soybeans, like, it's going to be tough. It might be tough if you're losing money on every acre. More acres is not better. And so I think margin per acre and having an enterprise that's actually difficult to scale up can be a good thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and my dad and I talk about that our land base here is probably not changing too much because of the cost of land.
Well,
So how do we, and I don't like the term maximize, but how do we optimize what we're doing here and bring in more profit for the farm?
I think that's a great conversation to have.
Before we dive a little bit more into soil and restoring soil and doing a better job on managing what we have, let's talk about your background a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on a diversified family farm outside of Colony, Kansas, population of about 300, about
Oh, yes.
500 at the time. One of those generic towns, I guess, Colony, but still there. Its claim to fame is they put a railroad station there because it was the highest point in elevation between Kansas City and the Gulf of Mexico. So if a
Oh,
train
yes.
stopped there, it was downhill both ways. So the train
Oh.
could go with the
So it get
gravity
going.
each
Yeah,
direction.
get started. And is that on Highway 75?
Nope, that is on Highway 169.
Oh,
Between Iowa
169
and
goes
Arnold.
up and jogs over. Um, 75 goes through Bartlesville, but it may jog over in Kansas. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes on up through Yates Center and then Burlington and up to Topeka. So,
Yes.
but yeah, and here, and it's kind of odd because in high school, last thing I wanted to do in life was farm.
Oh, yes.
Farming to me was just mind numbing, boring hours on a tractor, stirring
Oh, yes.
dust and choking and just misery. And I didn't find it interesting at all. And then I go to college and I had no idea what I wanted to be, but the military rejected me because I had allergies. So I had
Oh,
to do
yes.
something. And so I said, well, what's the highest exit salary? That's engineering. So I'll go do that. And got in my engineering classes. And I was doing well as far as grades, but I
Right.
wasn't thriving.
Oh, yes.
I wasn't interested. And my roommates were all agriculture majors, and they'd come home and they'd have the neatest discussions. I'm like, well, this is way more interesting than what we learned in calculus today.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, I'll take a few ag classes. And so one of the first classes I took was crop science.
Oh,
And
yes.
the professor, after I turned in my first test, my professor wrote on there, big red up at the top, see me after class. I'm like, oh,
Oh, no.
sure, I got an A on the test. He must think I cheated or something, which is kind of hard because it's an essay test.
Oh, yeah.
Hard to cheat on an essay test or be accused of cheating unless you've got someone cheated off me or,
Right.
So I went into his office and he handed me a magazine called New Farm Magazine. He said, somehow I got double subscribed to this. And so I always get duplicate copies. Thought you'd like this. Said, from reading the answers on your test, I think you'd appreciate this.
Oh, yes.
So I read that and, growing up, we did things very conventionally. Corn, beans, wheat, cattle, everything, full tillage and just, very conventional.
Right.
And here's this book is this magazine put out by the Rodale Institute, the
Oh, okay.
organic
Yes,
gardening,
very much into the
but it
organic
was
gardening.
aimed at broadacre farmers. And it was about cover crops and, pastured poultry, and Joel Salatin was in there and, all these guys. I'm like, wow, this is fascinating.
Yes.
I mean, this is intellectually challenging. This is, integrating all these systems together. And, and as a kid, I loved nature. And, I'd find a really cool place out in the woods to play. And next thing I know, Dad has it bulldozed down and it's growing corn and beans. And I
Oh,
always
yeah.
saw agriculture and nature as, being the complete polar
Oh,
opposite
yeah.
of each other. And that agriculture is something where you destroyed that cool place where I could find salamanders, or this neat place, that, had all these neat snakes or, birds or whatever. And here was this completely foreign concept to me that you could have a system of agriculture that used nature to solve its problems. And the very back page of that magazine, it had an excerpt from a book. And I started reading this excerpt, and I'm like, this is the most fascinating concept I've ever come across. A book called Tree Crops.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
it was basically, just like we were talking, corn and soybeans that just dominate our landscape. And you think about the eastern U.S. was oak, hickory, chestnuts, two carbohydrate producers, and then hickory would be protein and fat. And we went and with hand labor chopped all that down. Oak, hickory, and chestnuts, perfect pig foods that
Oh, yeah.
provide pig food at zero cost, zero inputs every year, provides shade, and it provides protection from the wind. And then in our infinite wisdom, we use hand labor to cut all that down so we can grow corn and soybeans.
Oh, yeah.
Do what? Feed pigs.
You're right. Yeah.
So this book, Tree Crops, is all about using trees to feed livestock.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a system of agriculture that doesn't require inputs and rebuilds soil, rebuilds ecosystems, no pollution, no soil loss, no, eutrophication of water, or any of the other problems that we have with agriculture. And best of all, and the book was written by a geographer who traveled around the world and saw these different types of systems.
Oh,
He
yes.
said that every civilization that uses trees to feed livestock, and there aren't very many, but they were happy and
Oh,
thriving.
yes. Yeah.
And all these civilizations based on grain ended up in ruination, both financially and, so it really started my thought processes going, thinking about possibilities and like, wow, we've been doing things the wrong way for centuries. And maybe we ought to think about, looking at nature and how does nature do things and how are we doing things different? I know that,
Oh, yeah.
if you fight gravity, you're going to get real tired and you're going to lose.
Right.
And you can't, if you fight nature, you're going to go real broke and you're going to lose.
You are.
And so, we just need to, if we can harness nature to nudge nature, I think, first of all, we ask nature, what would you have us do?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What would you like us to do? If we are in this for our own selfish purposes, then we probably are going to fail. If we're in it as stewards, stewards of the land placed here by God, yeah, I think we're probably going to have a better outcome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and how have we approached the land historically? It's what can we get out of it for our own selfish purposes? Obviously, I mean, we need to, you can call it selfish. We need to live. We need to make a living. We need to provide for our families and provide for our fellow people. But the manner in which we do that, if we're after just a quick buck, that's a whole different thing than if we're trying to provide healthy, nutritious food for our family.
Oh, yeah.
There's, whenever you get into the exploitation mindset and greed, bad things are going to happen, and bad things have happened. I mean, in the Middle Eastern grain-based agriculture, once it's spread out from, Abu Huraira, which is, where they think the Garden of Eden was located, where biblical scholars, archaeologists feel that was, as it spread out from there. I mean, the Sahara Desert's only about 4,000 years old.
Oh, yeah.
It's a man-made desert.
Yeah.
And what caused it? wasn't people burning fossil fuel 4,000 years ago.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Well, people were trying to plow up, cut down trees and growing wheat instead of the vegetation that was there. And so, yeah, so tree crops very, very profound impact on my life and
Did
completely
did
changed
that
the way I think.
did tree crops really cement that in your mind that, hey, engineering's not for you and you want to go into agronomy or a related field?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And as far as agronomy, my goal then was to raise livestock. And then I went to beef science class and we did a break even.
Oh,
What's it
yes.
take to raise a calf to maturity? And, here's the expenses. And so now you'll notice 80% of these expenses are feed cost. This is why we would make you animal science majors take an agronomy class or two. And I'm, wait a minute. All these animal science classes, all the classes the animal science majors take make up 20% of the difference. And the classes, the two agronomy classes make up 80. Something's,
Oh,
this,
yes.
this pyramid's inverted.
Right.
So seems to me if I want to raise livestock, I should learn more about agronomy. So that afternoon, I went and switched my major into agronomy so I
Oh,
can
yes.
profitably raise livestock. And I still took enough I finished my undergrad 2 classes shy of an animal science degree.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Well, I did get an
So,
agronomy degree. I got a certificate to teach science, high school science. And so we got a bachelor's in that. Then got a master's in agronomy in rangeland management, emphasis at a junior college for 15 years. Then went in private industry and uh, bounced around different jobs within private industry, seed business, working as an agronomist. And then a couple years ago, kind of made the decision that I I really want to basically provide information, for lack of a better
oh, yes.
term. I I don't like selling products.
Hmm.
I like helping people.
It goes back to that teaching that you did for so long. You're teaching others.
Well, I mean that's where I feel I always enjoyed the teaching process. I did not enjoy dealing with administration and administrative duties and keeping up with state required record keeping, which drove
Oh,
me
yes.
just
Oh, I
nuts.
imagine so.
Spent,
No.
you know, 15 hours a week teaching and 60 hours a week proving to the state that I was teaching.
No. Right.
And and so just mind-numbingly frustrating. And so, but now I get to, I have clients that I come to their farms or I basically come up with plans to solve their
Oh,
problems, or
yeah.
at least what I believe will solve their problems. People have
Right.
been very happy so far, and it makes me feel, I can go give the guy some ideas that can solve some issues that has been a thorn in his side, and he can sleep at night, he can make more money, and he can be happy, and he can make that money in a more ecological fashion so that not just he benefits, but everybody around him also benefits.
Oh, yeah.
It gives me a
Yeah.
good feeling. It's something I really enjoy.
Now, throughout your teaching career and your private industry career, did you also have livestock on the side?
For the, yeah, pretty much during that entire time, I did livestock one or another, mostly cattle, and uh, had my own land, my own pasture. I was up by Cortland, Kansas, until, gosh, when did I live from there? 4 years ago, 5 years ago. somewhere around there. I had an operation. I bought an irrigated corn and soybean farm and
Oh,
converted it
yes.
all into irrigated pasture, which is not the route most people choose. Most people go the opposite direction. They'll plow up grassland to make crops. And I thought crops, I did that for a few years and made an incredible amount of money and gave 110% of it away to the fertilizer dealer, the chemical dealer, the
Oh,
machinery
yes.
dealer, the fuel dealer. There was nothing left for me at the end. I'm like, this is ugly. I'm cashing big checks, but I'm writing bigger ones.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this would have been, the early 2000s, which probably the darkest. I mean, we talk about the 80s, but I think 2000 to 2005 may have been uglier than the 80s, other than
Oh, yeah.
interest rate.
Yeah.
But as far as
Yeah.
relation between crop prices and input prices, I think the early 2000s were worse than the 80s. If
Oh, yes.
we'd had 18% interest, it would have been an absolute bloodbath.
Mm.
But interest rates were pretty low at that time, so we could kind of hang on by our fingernails. So I made the decision. I said, input prices are killing me, and I'm not making any money with the corn and soybeans. I'm going to put everything to pasture, and everything's going to get grazed, and I'm going to build soil.
Oh, yeah.
And if nothing else, if all I can do is keep my payments made, someday my kids are going to end up with one really nice piece of dirt.
Right. Yes. Leaving it better for the next generation.
Yeah, I said I have a job on the side. All I need to do is make payments, and they're going to end up with a little piece of black gold. And I developed a really good grazing system. I had about 100 pair on 135 acres, 120 of which were irrigated.
Oh, yeah.
And I was grazing those 100 pair 10 months out of the year on that.
Oh, yes.
And then, for the other 2 months, there was corn stalks and in abundance, a big irrigated area. So there's corn stalks everywhere. And so that's pretty productive piece of ground.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And I had a sequence, and my best weaning way, I always did delay. I moved into delayed weaning rather than early weaning, which some people preach. I did delayed weaning because as long as you can keep quality feed in front of that cow, why not extend that lactation period and make her work a higher percent
Oh, yeah.
of the year? I mean, you
Yeah.
got to feed her anyhow. Now, obviously, a lactating cow needs more feed and of higher quality than a dry cow. But if
Right.
you've got an abundance of high quality feed that's cheap, that you can graze. Now, if you're hauling alfalfa hay to her, that's a different deal.
Right.
You're no
Yeah.
longer cheap feed. But if you can have, high quality grain seed, cover crops and corn stalks, or stockpile novel undefined fescue, all these different high quality late fall, early winter options, then there's really no reason to wean early. So I actually ended up weaning it at 10 months of age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But even before that, I was having, at 8 months, I was weaning 800-pound calves.
Oh, yeah.
Fairly
Yeah.
large frame cattle, but
Oh,
still
yeah.
800-pound calves in 8 months. And
Yeah.
doing that by keeping from the time they hit the ground until the time they were weaned, there was good quality green feed.
Oh, yes.
They weren't
Yeah.
eating brown stuff. That they were eating green that entire time. And so it took, and the secret to that is I had multiple pasture types. I had cool season pastures, cool season grasses. I had warm season grass pastures. I had annual pastures, summer annuals, winter annuals,
Oh, yes.
crop residues. I had all these different things, all sequenced so the animals moved what was good at that point in time.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so, and everything was able to be rested during critical periods so that there are times where severe grazing is extremely detrimental to a plant, and there are times where severe grazing is not. And so if you know when those periods are, you can put a mob of cattle out there for a short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't hurt the grass at all. You know, if you take it down to bare dirt, obviously it does, but there are times when the grass is more resilient than others. So
Yeah.
if you know those times, when you need to rest, when the optimum nutrition periods are, when the times where grazing is not detrimental, and you can, it's pretty amazing what you can accomplish.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
100 pair on 135 acres and doing that for 10 months out of the year. Yeah, that's, and the normal stocking rate in the area was from 6 to 8 acres of native grass for 5 months.
Oh, yes.
A couple months of corn stalks and then 4 months of hay. That was normal. And, so, they're 6 to 8 acres for 5 months. That's in 1.2 to 1.6 acres per pair per month. And I was doing that for essentially a year.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that's 10 to 12 times the area stock area. Now, I had irrigation for 2 months out of the year, but still, that's only 2 months out of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. But so you had irrigation, but you only had enough for 2 months out of the year to use it, which, of course, being in.
The water was delivered down at canal. And
yeah.
the water deliveries were based on the assumption that everybody's growing corn. So
yes.
the corn tasseled, they started delivering water.
Oh, okay.
And when the corn, began to dent or black layer, they shut the water off.
Oh, interesting.
And so I could water most years, July and August.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very helpful, obviously.
That's
usually the times you need it most. But
right. That's when I would like to irrigate. Yeah.
If you had to pick 2 months to irrigate, those are the ones I'd pick. But, it's, if you're trying to, if you're dry at other times of the year, does it do you that much good? It's sure better than nothing. And it was, there were times where it was an absolute lifesaver. But the funny thing is that once I got my irrigated pastures really up and going, really didn't need that irrigation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I really did not have a lot of drought stress.
Oh,
At least not on my warm season grass pastures. Now, on my cool season grass pastures, I still applied irrigation water. Yeah. But I planted a field of eastern gamma grass. My book, Managing Pasture, the cover photo.
Oh, yes.
That's one of my eastern gamma grass pastures. And, it never showed drought stress and trying to think. I don't believe I irrigated that for the last, at least not for the last 5 years that I had that.
Oh, yes.
And that maybe 10.
Yeah.
Well, I went a long time without irrigating that field because it just never showed stress. Now, the cool season grasses and the annuals, I still irrigated. But
still irrigating, yeah.
When I was raising corn and soybeans, we were originally, when I bought the place, it had a 17-acre-inch allotment. The next year, it got cut to 5. The first year I bought it, got cut to 5. It's just kind of catastrophic. Then
that would be.
Corn and beans. And so when I went to pasture, I went made 2 changes, planted everything pasture, and then replaced all my open ditch irrigation with subsurface drip tape. At one time, I was told that I had the only subsurface drip tape pasture in the world.
Oh, yes. Dale, let's switch gears just a little bit into our overgrazing section sponsored by Redmond. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. We're going to take a deeper dive into building soils. And you were talking about even your farm you had there in Colony. Was it Colony? No, it was in Portland, Kansas, that you had over a year. You were able to build some soil there. Before we actually talk about how should a farmer build soil, what is the ideal soil?
Well, you'd like a soil to do what you ask of it. And what do we ask of soil? Well, it has to grow plants. It has to be capable of growing plants. What do plants need? They need moisture. And so the soil has to be able to absorb rainfall and hold it and supply it to the plant when it needs it. And the roots have to be able to grow down to a depth in that. And the limiting factor to root penetration in the soil is oxygen penetration in the soil. So the soil has to be porous to allow oxygen to diffuse down to a depth in the soil. And the soil has to provide mineral nutrients when the plant needs it in the form that they need them. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, all those essential nutrients. So, and a lot of people think of soil as being, inert particles that we dump fertilizer onto and plants grow. That's really how it works. Every nutrient that a plant takes up has been probably passed through a microbial body multiple times. And so when we are managing soil, it's not so much about managing rock particles, it's about managing microbes. And that's once you forget the idea that you're managing little ground up rocks and instead you're managing microbes, then you start to begin the journey of understanding how to build better soil. And that's really, when people talk about soil health, that's such a vague term. What does soil health mean? And, really soil health is just like, having a healthy body. It does what it's supposed to, get out of bed in the morning, you've got energy to do things and free of illnesses. Soil health, you're basically talking about having a good functional microbial population in the soil. Because that's really where the action takes place. Everything the plant needs, microbes can provide, other than moisture. But even again, there are microbes that help plants take up moisture. And so it does need to rain, but your plants can be much, much more resilient to drought if you have the proper microbial population in the soil.
So what I'm hearing you say, Dale, is I should have paid closer attention in microbiology.
I think we all should have paid more attention in microbiology class. When I took soils class, undergraduate soils, my professor said, we're going to spend today talking about soil microbiology. And the reason we're only spend a day on it, well, he said, this is the single most important study on the planet. He said, because this is what life depends upon.
Oh, yes.
Soil microbiology. All life
Yeah.
on this planet depends on microbes in the soil. And so this is probably the most important study on the planet. He said, and I'm going to apologize in advance because we're only going to spend one class period on it.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
because it's not important, but because I only know what I was taught, and I was only taught about one class period's worth.
Oh, yeah.
That I was
Yeah.
taught about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and moisture. And I can tell you what the mineralogy and the clay particle is, but I can't tell you anything about microbes in the soil. But this is the single most important study on the planet. And I'm like, wow. So I ended up taking a soil microbiology class.
So Dale, talking about the managing your microbes, how does a farmer out here improve the health of their microbes in their soil?
And same way you improve the health of your livestock, you feed them. You feed them. You give them a nutritious diet. Diet's everything for us. It's everything for our livestock, and it's everything for our, and you shelter. You don't let them get too hot, and you try to keep them warm in the winter. And so you do that with keeping a roof over their heads. Have a layer of protective crop residue on top of the soil.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to think that microbes fed primarily on crop residue. Now, the crop residue is basically there for shelter.
Oh, yes.
Microbes eat root exudates. And a lot of people don't know this, but of all the glucose that plants produce in photosynthesis, depending on the plant species, whether they're perennial or annual, from 25 to 50% of that glucose is leaked out of the root system and feeds microbes.
Oh, yes.
That is what soil microbes, the beneficial soil microbes that we want, that's what they eat. Now you think about, now in a perennial ecosystem, those microbes are being fed 12 months out of the year because the roots
Okay.
are alive.
Yeah.
Maybe the tops aren't growing, but the roots are still alive.
Right.
But in our annual cropping systems, corn, soybeans, they have roots that are alive maybe 4 months out of the year. And, the first month, the root systems are pretty tiny.
Not very much there, yeah.
So we have covered our country with an agricultural system that does not feed microbes, but about 1/3 of the year. And so that's why our soils tend to become depleted in annual cropping systems.
Dale, in my reading and my thinking about it, I had never really thought about it from that point of view that, when we're farming ground, I'm thinking about tillage doing such damage to the structure and there's no protection on the soil. I hadn't thought about it from the point of feeding the microbes because like you said, there's not living matter on there with roots that are living to feed them.
Yeah. And so, I'm a big proponent of no-till, have been for years, but when, organic farmers come to me and they say, well, I till and my organic matter is going up. Oh, you're mistaken. But those organic farmers, even though they're doing tillage, they're also growing cover crops for a nitrogen source or, for weed control.
Yeah.
So they're tilling these under and they say, well, I'm incorporating that top growth into the soil. No, that's not the benefit. It's the growing of this. It's the root exudates while that cover crop's growing, not the incorporation of it at the end.
Oh, yeah.
It's the it's the root exudates while that cover crop is growing that's really doing the heavy lifting of soil improvement and organic matter increases. And now when people tell me that, I say, well, just think what you'd have if you didn't do all that tillage too.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you really want to improve soil, you have to stop tilling. I mean, tilling is destructive. I mean, it just is. There's no question about that. I mean, I hate to use the term settled science, but that's settled science.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the less tillage you do, the better. But the second piece of the puzzle is the elimination of fouling. You want all of agriculture really is converting sunlight into something useful through photosynthesis, and then adding value through a chain of events. And so if you have sunlight hitting bare soil, that is sunlight going to waste that you can't ever go back in time and recover. The goal should be to utilize every photon and put it to use. And if you're not turning it into corn or a cow or whatever, a papaya, then it can be used to feed microbes that perform all sorts of essential tasks.
Oh, yeah.
Including just soil improvement. And that's how you build soil. And now it's amazing, you read a gardening book, they tell you, go get your wheelbarrow and dump all this compost or whatever on the soil and say, well, that's fine and dandy. I was speaking at a conference one time, and the audience was mostly farmers, but we had a suburban gardener.
Oh, yes.
And I was talking about cover crops and all this, and she just says, I don't know. She stands up and says, I don't know why you farmers are so stupid. You can't figure this out. She said, here's what you need to do. You just need to do what I do. I go to the city dump and I scoop out their leaf pile and their composted leaf pile, and I fill up a pickup bed, and I haul 2 pickup loads every year and put it on my garden. And I said, well, how big is your garden?
Right.
And so we calculated out, and I said, did the math in my head. I said, now you realize that this guy over here that farms 1,000 acres, to do what you do on your garden, it would take 250,000 trips to the dump with his pickup.
Oh, yeah.
Said, number one, he can't possibly do 1,000 trips a day.
Right.
250 days out of the year. And there's not that much stuff there. You take the entire city and all this stuff here, it wouldn't cover 1,000 acre farm with compost. And you cannot, I call that the musical chairs method. You're not really increasing organic matter. You're just moving it from one place to another.
Just moving it somewhere else. Yeah.
You're impoverishing all these city yards to enrich a few gardens. You can't do that at scale. You can't do it on a planetary scale. If you really want to increase soil organic matter, you have to do it by capturing the sunlight that falls on that piece of land and move it underground. That's through photosynthesis. That it really is the only way you can truly enrich soil. Any other method basically involves burning a lot of fossil fuel to move stuff around. And so that in a nutshell is basically how you improve soil.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, just to feed the microbes, you've got to manage your grass. And obviously when we're talking about grazing, we're not doing too much tilling, but a lot of people out there are grazing cover crops and other things. In my area, it's pasture. So managing those pastures better.
Yes. And so like your area so let's just say that you've got Bermuda grass and you've got tall fescue. Bermuda grass is a warm, very warm season grass, tropical grass, that really photosynthesizes about 4 months out of the year. Now, the roots are alive the other 8 months, but you're really not getting that pumping, that big, massive input of sugar moving to the roots and feeding those microbes, except for about 4 months out of the year. So, and if your Bermuda grass is grazed down to where it looks like a golf putting green, even those 4 months are not. So there are a couple things you can do there. One is to extend the period of photosynthesis by adding cool season species into the mixture. Now that can be cool season annuals like cereal rye or annual ryegrass, or some arrowleaf clover, crimson clover, that can also provide nitrogen. Or maybe it can be something like alfalfa, another perennial out there. That would extend that period of photosynthesis. And then you want to leave enough leaf area after each grazing episode. Now, if you're continuous grazing, animals, especially horses, tend to go back to the same plants over and over again. And so you have, bare ground, and then you got big, tall, rank stuff that's all turned brown because it's become over mature and no longer photosynthesizing and is shading out what's below it. You get this patch grazing. One of the values of rotational grazing is that you can manage how much of that leaf that you take at a time. And so that, if you're grazing below about 4 inches, you're letting sunlight hit bare soil. And that solar energy is going to go to waste. And then you manage the rest. You want to have enough rest, because the first thing a plant does after it's lost leaf area is try to reestablish those leaves. It has to invest usually some root reserves, some carbohydrates, to rebuild those leaves. And if you graze those leaves too quickly, then the plant is in this constant state of rebuilding. It's not moving sugars down to the roots, so it's not feeding microbes. You want those leaves to be in a constant state of generosity. You want those plants to be generous, and they can't be generous if they're on the brink of starvation themselves. You have to have
they've got to be healthy to be generous with the glucose.
You board an airplane, they say, in case something happens, put on your own oxygen mask before you put it on someone else's. Because if you pass out, you can't help the person beside you. And a plant that's on the brink of starvation because it has inadequate leaf area from too much defoliation, too much grazing, can't help itself, and it can't help the microbes. And so just, managing that grazing, and it's not necessarily lighter grazing. And that's a real misconception. I work with people who have, just by managing the timing and doing rotational grazing so that they, no individual plant gets grazed too low, but all plants get grazed, and then all plants are uniformly rested and come back and then resting at critical times, and then coming back and taking half of it as dormant season grazing. I've got clients that have increased their stocking rate 5-fold.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Increasing it that much will make a difference on the bottom line.
Everybody assumes that, you have to sacrifice economically in order to manage pastures correctly. And that's absolutely not the case. You can actually increase your stocking rate while treating your grass better if you know how to do it. And so, but fescue, that's a cool season grass. It barely photosynthesizes in midsummer. If you go out into a fescue patch in August, that ground is rock hard because microbes reverse compaction. And if those microbes aren't getting fed, your soil gets hard. And
Oh, yeah.
so, you I work with some of my clients. We are drilling summer annuals like sedan grass or sunflowers or soybeans or even corn into fescue during the summer. Now, if they have to have an alternate source of grazing during the summer, it is absolutely amazing how loose and mellow that soil becomes
Oh, yes.
and how much more productive the field becomes every year you do that. I
So,
mean, you're
so by doing
generating
that,
more feed, but you're making better soil as well.
oh, yeah. And so by doing that, you're getting an increased production out of your fescue when it is growing, and then you're getting this other, whatever you planted in there to forage from it.
Yeah. And, first time I saw this practice, I thought, oh, man, that's got to be really hard on your fescue. And I mean, back in the 70s, first time I ever saw it before I even went to college. Oh, that's
Oh,
got
yes.
on your grass. No, take a look at this. And, I went out into a brome grass field where we were doing this in September, and I could take a brome grass leaf and stretch it up and touch my belt.
Oh, yes.
Now, I'm not very tall, but that's still, 3 foot plus.
Oh, yes.
And so it's like, wow, I have never seen the fall growth cycle of brome. And this is not a seed head. This is
Oh, yeah.
a hayman. They
Yes.
planted this after the brome was hayed off in June. And so this was fall growth cycle of that brome, 30 some inches tall.
Oh, wow.
I've never seen that before. I'm like, there's something to this.
Yeah.
And it's modifying the microclimate, creating a cooler microclimate where a cool season grass can grow without being heat stressed, and adding fruit exudates from additional photosynthesis.
Now, one thing going on that path a little bit more, doing a pasture drill and putting some of that else, some other species in there. What if you don't have a pasture drill? Is there some species you could broadcast to get the same type of result? I know broadcasting is not going to be as effective,
Yeah,
but there's not everyone's got a pasture drill or the capability to use one.
sure. There are some species that have broadcast. As far as summer annuals, teff grass is one that broadcasts really easy. Crabgrass works great into cool season pastures like that for a summer annual. Now, having some perennial legumes and forbs out there, red clover, white clover, your annual Lespedezas, not Sericea, but annual Lespedezas.
I have too much Sericea.
Yeah, the ones that cattle actually eat,
Yeah.
not the noxious weed Sericea. And chicory, plantain are very, very beneficial species. You get some diversity out there. Now, if you continuously you put those into endophyte infected fescue and you continuously graze, well, you've got a plant that tastes nasty with a few scattered plants of these really good things out there. I mean, you know what's going to happen. Animals just graze them out. So
Right.
that's another big benefit of rotational grazing is that every plant gets bitten once, but not twice, and then you move. And then you keep moving them around and if you can provide an alternate grazing source in late summer, you can allow all those legumes to produce seed, give them a 60 to 90-day rest in late summer.
Oh, yeah.
All those legumes to produce seed, and then come back and graze them in the fall. And, every cow pie is full of seed now. And
Oh, yeah.
it's new plants. Yeah. And so you can keep those legumes. People say, those legumes don't grow in my area. They only last a year. I said, well, are you rotational grazing? No. Well, that's why. It's not anything unique about your area. It's that you're not grazing in a manner conducive to their survival and reseeding.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
getting rest. They're getting bit off over and over and over again, and they're not allowed to reseed. And if you do that, you can maintain a good balanced stand indefinitely.
Well, I will admit that's one area of my grazing management I have to do a better job on is giving some rest time there for those legumes to go to seed. We used to have a lot more than we do now, and I was saving one pasture that I had really nice. I wanted to go seed in that pasture, and my neighbor sprayed, and using an airplane, and they got like 400 yards over on our side and killed all that vetch and clover I had been protecting so I could get it to go to seed because we don't have as much because I haven't been aware of that on my management. And that's one area I've got to improve is let those clovers, vetch go to seed so that seed bank is really filled with seeds for it. Because those
Yeah.
cows, you turn them into a pasture with vetch or clover, that's the first thing they go eat.
Oh, yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Low in fiber and high in protein, and especially if they're in a grass-dominated system that's low in protein, that's what they're craving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now, something I saw on one of your videos, I think with NCAT soil for water, uh, you showed a picture that I thought was really interesting. A canola, where that had been grown, the root space from it.
Oh, yeah.
Then you grew some soybean after that, and the soybean root used that canola root path to send down roots. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. So, like I said, the limiting factor to root penetration in the soil is lack of oxygen. Roots have to have at least 10% oxygen in order to grow. And that's pretty much true of all plants. But some plants have evolved mechanisms to allow them to root deeper. And one mechanism is parenchyma tissue, like cattails.
Yes.
In the growing ponds. Cattail roots, if you've ever taken a cattail root, they're spongy, and the cattail stem is all spongy. And, well, as long as any of that green part of that cattail is above water, oxygen can diffuse into that and go down that spongy tissue and reach the roots, which is how
yes.
cattails can grow in standing water. Most plants can't. Eastern gamma grass has parenchyma tissue in the roots, so it can tolerate a lot of standing water. Reed canary grass has parenchyma tissue. Another thing is, if you understand, most of the oxygen that's used in soil is used by microbes. Especially, and the warmer the soil gets, the more oxygen microbes use. So in the summertime, we're very oxygen deficient.
Oh, yeah.
In the wintertime, however, when the soil temperature is below 50 degrees, microbes in general go dormant. But cool season plants can grow below 50 degrees, even though microbes can't. So there's a window in there where cool season plants, all of a sudden there's oxygen in the soil and there wasn't before. And so you need to, if you have the plants that grow roots between 50 degrees and 32, when the soil freezes, you can poke holes through those hard pans. And then the next year, when those roots decay, warm season plants can use those passages to grow their roots.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So you can just create a deeper rooted system.
Very interesting. Dale, I appreciate you coming on. It is time for us to shift gears and do our famous 4 questions. Ken Cove Farm Fence is a proud supporter of the Grazing Grass podcast and grazers everywhere. At Ken Cove Farm Fence, they believe there's true value within the community of grazers and land stewards. The results that follow proper management and monitoring can change the very world around us. That's why Ken Cove is dedicated to providing an ever-expanding line of grazing products to make your chores easier and your land more abundant. Whether you're growing your own food on the homestead or grazing on thousands of acres, Ken Cove has everything you need to do it well. From reels to tumblewheels, polytwine to electric nets, water valves to water troughs, you'll find what you're looking for at Ken Cove. They carry brands like Speedrite, O'Brien's, Kiwi Tech, Strainrite, Job, and more. Ken Cove is proud to be part of your regenerative journey. Call them today or visit kencove.com, and be sure to follow them on social media and subscribe to the Ken Cove YouTube channel at Ken Cove Farm Fence for helpful how-to videos and new product releases. Same four questions we ask of all of our guests, sponsored by Ken Cove Farm Fence. And our first question, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Oh gosh. The tree crops is a favorite of mine. Even though it's not specific to grass, it's the concepts.
Yeah.
Jim Garish's books have been very influential for me. Management intensive grazing, kick the hay habit. Those were very influential to me early on. Need to plug my own book, Managing Pasture, but I don't know if I'm not sure if I'm allowed to claim that as one of my favorites. Yeah, so those were probably the watershed books.
Yes. Yeah.
Grazing career.
Excellent resources there. What's your favorite tool for the farm?
Laptop.
Oh, yes. I'm not sure we've had laptop as an answer before for that question.
Really?
We've had YouTube and maybe more specific sites. I'm trying to think back. Right off, I can't think of it.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to access information.
Oh, yes.
You can make intelligent decisions, just critical.
There is so much information out there. It's become a issue of making sure you're finding the right information.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of conflicting information there, especially in election years. So,
oh yes, especially, yeah. Hopefully, it's calming down now and things can get kind of back to normal. Our third question: what would you tell someone just getting started?
Educate yourself. There's a saying that one of my favorites, you can either learn from others, books, reading, conversations, or you can pee on the electric fence yourself. And, educating yourself is so much cheaper and takes less time than making the mistakes yourself. So learn all you can, before you do anything, learn.
Oh, yes.
Self-educate. Best advice I can give anybody in any field. Constantly learn.
Yeah. Excellent advice there. And lastly, Dale, where can others find out more about you?
You can go to my website, regenerativewisdom.com. We have excellent material on there, and we do on-farm consultations. We do speaking events, and we have some material there on the website. So Dr. Elizabeth and Heilman and I, that's our company. And so check us out, see what we have to offer.
Oh, wonderful. Now, you all had a grazing school just not too long ago that I really wanted to go to, and I didn't make it up there. Or do you have one planned for the future?
We will do them in the future. We don't have one in the works right now.
Oh, yeah.
But
very good, Dale. Appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today.
You bet. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. Gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.